You take on too much. How to get out of the rescuer role. You dream of change. You want to start over, set boundaries, change jobs, leave painful relationships, finally start taking care of yourself. But something inside holds you back, as if you are tripping yourself. Why does this happen? Why, even when you realize that you can't go on like this, do you continue living the same way? This video is about the internal reasons that prevent change, about the brain that clings to the familiar, about the fear that disguises itself as laziness, about the hidden benefit of staying where it hurts but feels familiar, and about how to start moving forward anyway. Why the rescue theme is so painful for many. You get tired, but keep helping. Support when you're struggling yourself. Take on too much, because you can't do otherwise, because you feel you must, because without it, you lose the sense of worth. The topic of rescuing is painful, because it is often connected to how we were loved in childhood. If love was conditional, we are used to being accepted not for who we are, but for what we do, for caring, for helping, for self-sacrifice. Over time, this model becomes an internal script. You help even when no one asked. You agree even when you're tired. You take responsibility even if the person is an adult. And every time you do this, you hope it will bring you warmth, closeness, gratitude. But more often it brings the opposite: irritation, resentment, exhaustion. The pain of a rescuer is not about strength, it's about loneliness. Because when you give all the time, there's nothing left for yourself. Because when you decide everything, you're not supported. Because when you're always strong, no one suspects how hard it is for you. And yet, letting go of the rescuer role is frightening. It gives a sense of necessity, control, and self-worth. It seems, if I stop, I won't be loved. If I don't help, everything will fall apart. If I say no, I will be abandoned. But the truth is, rescuing is not about caring. It's about fear. Fear of being unnecessary. Fear of letting go. Fear of being oneself, without a role, without a mask, without a heroism. And if you're reading this text, it means you're already developing a readiness to live differently. Not to rescue, but to be present. Not to prove your worth, but to feel it. Not to carry, but to walk together. This video is about how to exit the rescuer role, without accusations, without violence against yourself, with understanding of why you got into it, and with support on the way back to yourself. What is the rescuer role, and how you fall into it? The role of the rescuer is a deeply ingrained psychological strategy that develops not in adulthood, but much earlier, in childhood. It is not a choice, but a survival mechanism. It is not a virtue, but often a mask through which we hope to be accepted. You find yourself in this role when from childhood you carry the belief, to be loved, I must be needed. And this neediness is expressed in constant readiness to save, support, decide for others, and give up yourself in favor of others' interests. Such a girl early becomes a little adult. She cares for younger siblings, comforts her mother, tries not to disturb, gauges her father's mood, fears upsetting her grandmother. And at some point she internalizes that value is a function, that love is the price of sacrifice, that herself must be set aside if someone nearby needs help. The role of a rescuer can seem very attractive. Such people are responsible, sensitive, generous. They are always ready to help. They are loved and appreciated. But often, precisely for what they give, not for who they are, but for their function. That is why it is so difficult for them to step out of this role, because behind it lies the fear of being left without love, without recognition, without a place in other people's lives. Here's how you can recognize that you are in the rescuer role. You feel guilty if you refuse someone help, even if you're tired. You take responsibility for others' emotions, decisions, lives. You don't know how to ask for help. It seems like weakness or a burden to others. You often find yourself in relationships where you have to carry your partner. You suppress anger and fatigue, believing you have no right to them. And what is especially important, the role of the rescuer is not about real help. It's about control. When you save someone, you decide for them. You don't let them experience their own journey. You don't believe they can cope. And in doing so, you inadvertently devalue their strength. You find yourself in a role where you seem to give, but in reality, you lose yourself, your energy, your desires, your identity. How do you end up there? Through traumatic experiences in the family, emotionally immature parents, codependent relationships, lack of support. Through upbringing that emphasized duty rather than feelings. Be a good girl, don't upset, help everyone. Through repeating a model, if your mother or grandmother were also rescuers. It's as if you grow up in an atmosphere where love, neediness, where worth, sacrifice, where your true self is unimportant, and only your actions, giving and willingness to be there matter. But here's the truth. This role is not your nature, it's your protection. And when you start seeing it as a shield rather than as your true self, you get a chance to step out of it, to start listening to yourself, asking, do I want this? Can I do this? And where in this am I? The next step, understand why you can't stop, and where the line between caring and rescuing is. Why the theme of rescuing is so painful for many. You get tired but keep helping. Support when you're feeling down yourself. Take on too much because you can't do otherwise. Because you feel that you must. Because without it, you lose the sense of worth. Hidden reasons why you do this. When you repeatedly take on too much, when you help until exhaustion, when you can't say no, there are deep-rooted reasons behind this. Superficially, it may seem, I'm just caring. I want everyone to be well. But if you look deeper at the foundation of rescuing, there are very personal, vulnerable, and often unacknowledged motives. Inner necessity. If I am not needed, I do not exist. Many women have learned from childhood that their value lies in usefulness, that being just themselves is not enough, that love must be earned through actions, care, efforts. And from this arises a dependence on being needed. You start to feel that if you don't help anyone, if you're not occupied, you have no right to exist. Hence, the fear of stopping. Because in silence you can hear the inner emptiness. Feel, who am I if I don't help? Fear of rejection and abandonment. Subconsciously, you might believe, if you refuse, you will be rejected. If you don't save, you will stop being loved. If you don't take responsibility, you're bad. This belief can be so strong that even minimal resistance inside causes guilt, anxiety, and doubt. You agree not because you want to, but because you're afraid, otherwise you won't be accepted. And that's exactly why it's so hard for you to defend your boundaries. Control as a form of safety. When you save, you almost become the main person in the situation. You decide, you lead, you control. This creates an illusion of order and predictability, especially if there was a lot of chaos, instability, emotional volatility in childhood. Control becomes a way to cope with anxiety. You don't just help. You try to keep everything under control. Other people's emotions, situations, decisions, even someone else's life. But behind this lies fear. If you let go, something bad will happen. If you don't take responsibility, everything will fall apart. This isn't about love. It's about survival. Salvation as a way not to feel. Paradoxically, by helping others, you can escape from yourself, from your feelings, pain, loneliness. When you're busy with other people's problems, you don't have to face your own vulnerability. You may not realize that deep inside there is unhealed pain. And caring for others isn't about generosity. It's a way of avoidance, the habit of being good. You grew up with the belief you need to be a good girl, not to argue, not to get angry, not to refuse, to be convenient. And this belief is deeply embedded in your reactions. You don't just want to help. You almost feel you have no right not to help. You're afraid that you'll be considered selfish, that you'll be judged, that they'll say, "What kind of woman, daughter, friend are you after this?" And so every time you suppress the internal no, what to do about it? The first step is acknowledgement, not blaming yourself, but honestly looking, yes, I do this. Noticing when you take more than you need, when you agree against your will, when you care out of fear rather than love. The second step is to try asking yourself questions. Am I doing this willingly or out of fear? What will happen if I refuse? Does the person really can't manage without me? What do I feel when I help? What do I truly want? The third step is to find support within. Learn to be meaningful not only when you help. Notice your value outside the role of a rescuer. Find relationships where you're accepted not for your usefulness, but for your essence. Rescuing is not about strength. It's about old pain. But you are already an adult, and you can choose not to sacrifice yourself for love, but to love yourself, and from this state, be with others. Hidden reasons. Why you do this: internal need, fear of rejection, control. At first glance, it seems that you are simply helping, that you are kind, caring, responsible, that you are such a person, able to be there, support, solve. But if you look a little deeper, behind this outward kindness lie completely different reasons. Sometimes you don't even realize why you keep rescuing, dragging, giving, persuading, and adjusting. In this section, we will look deeper. Inner necessity. If I am not needed, I do not exist. One of the main reasons is the feeling of self-worth tied to what you do for others. When you were only noticed in childhood when you were good, obedient, helpful, you could form the belief, I am what I do for others. You don't just want to be helpful. You are afraid that without it, you will disappear, that you will go unnoticed, not chosen, not loved. This is how dependence on one's usefulness is born. You start living from a role. Being needed means being alive. And to stop being needed means to disappear, to be abandoned. This is not about bad parents. It's about the emotional hunger that arises when you weren't simply accepted, unconditionally. It's about how you learn to feel important through others' needs. And now you keep proving it again and again, at work, in relationships, in friendship. Fear of rejection. If I don't give, I will be rejected. The second reason is the fear of being rejected. Often it also stems from childhood, where punishment or coldness followed any uncomfortable emotion. Rejection, fatigue, anger. When you expressed yourself, you were punished with silence, distancing, offense. And you learned to not be abandoned. I need to please. You are afraid to say no because it might lead to loneliness. You are afraid to set boundaries because you believe they will stop loving you. You take others' things because otherwise you'll lose love. And you're not lying to yourself. You truly felt this in childhood. It wasn't a whim, but a survival strategy in an emotional environment where rejection is a threat. But now you are an adult. You can build relationships where love does not depend on sacrifice, where you are respected not for what you give, but for who you are. Control. I must keep everything in order. Another reason is control. When you save, it's as if you are managing the situation. You don't let others suffer, make mistakes, fall. But behind this is not care. Behind this is anxiety, fear of chaos, fear of helplessness, fear that everything will fall apart if you let go. Rescuing is a form of control over intolerable feelings, helplessness, insecurity, vulnerability. You don't let yourself stop because otherwise everything would become uncontrollable. You don't trust life. You don't trust others. You don't trust yourself. And so you run ahead, constantly making decisions, exerting effort. It seems for others, but in reality, it's so you don't have to face what you're afraid of: chaos, silence, the right of other people to choose their own path, even if you don't like it. Why else do you do this? Because it gives you meaning. Without others' problems, you lose the sense of your own significance. Because otherwise, it's scary. You don't know who you are without the role of the strong one. Because you don't know how to be in contact with yourself. It's easier to decide for others than to hear your own needs. Because that's how love was shown to you. You repeat the learned model. And all these reasons are not grounds for guilt. They are a consequence of early experiences where there was no space for you as a separate, living, feeling being. Where you were loved for something, not despite something. Where your feelings were secondary and others' needs were the main priority. But you can change this by becoming aware, noticing, asking yourself questions. Do I really want to do this? Or am I afraid I won't be accepted? Is this my choice, or an automatic reaction? Is this care, or a way to avoid loneliness? The path out of the rescuing role begins with honesty with yourself, and with a gentle perspective. I did this because I didn't know any other way. But now, I want to do it differently. How it destroys. Fatigue, resentment, losing oneself on the surface. You are strong, reliable, the one who's always there. You help, pull out, support. Everyone knows if anything happens, you won't refuse. You will cope, find a solution, lend a shoulder. But behind this facade, slow destruction. Quiet, almost imperceptible. It doesn't shout, doesn't demand attention. It simply accumulates over the years. And one day you wake up feeling that inside, emptiness, as if you have left your own life. Constant fatigue that rest doesn't help with. You can go to bed earlier and still wake up exhausted. Go on a weekend vacation and come back even more tired. Get a massage, go to a spa, on vacation, do yoga, and nothing changes. This is not just physical fatigue. It is emotional and mental exhaustion that comes from constant overstrain. From the need to hold everything together, to solve everything, to be a support for others when you have no support yourself. You are on duty 24/7, even when everything is calm inside, tension. Because if not me, then who? Because suddenly, someone might feel unwell, and you are needed again. Because relaxing means losing control, and losing control is scary. Your body is constantly in mobilization mode, and one day it starts to malfunction. Insomnia, hormonal imbalance, chronic fatigue, apathy, panic attacks, psychosomatic symptoms. These are signals. Your body can no longer keep up with this race, but you don't hear them. You're too busy with others' affairs. Suppressed resentment that turns into irritation and pain. You do so much, and in response, silence, or criticism, or you're strong, you'll manage. And inside, resentment grows. But you don't allow yourself to feel it. Because a good girl doesn't get angry. Because it's out of love. Because you can't make demands on those you help. This hurt doesn't go away. It accumulates. With every rejection, with every ungratefulness, with every "I'm tired, but I'll do it anyway." You become irritable, angry, but not outwardly, inwardly, against yourself. And this leads to feelings of guilt. You get angry that you're not appreciated, and immediately feel ashamed of this anger. You want to rest, and feel bad about it. You want to say no, and hear a voice inside. You're abandoning. And it's a vicious circle. You give, get offended, get angry, blame yourself, and give again. Only now out of fear, out of a sense of duty, out of exhaustion, losing yourself. At some point you realize you don't know what you want. You don't know what you like. You don't know what makes you feel good. Because all your decisions were about others, how it will be convenient for them, what they will say, what they expect from you, what will happen if you don't do it. You don't listen to your body. You don't understand your feelings. Your desires are what is convenient for others. Your boundaries are how much you can endure. Your yes is always yes, and your no is not for you. You lose contact with yourself, not because you're bad, but because you've lived your life not truly yours for too long. You lived for being needed, for being good, for maintaining relationships, to avoid feeling loneliness. And then one day, you're with a person to whom you give everything, and in response, coldness, or devaluation, or silence. And suddenly you realize you don't know who you are. Without this role, without this function, without this heroism. You ask yourself questions. Where am I in all this? Why do I feel so bad even though I seem to be doing everything right? Who am I if I am not needed? These questions can be painful, but they are important, because it is from them that the return begins, to yourself, not to a role, not to duty, but to the living I, which has the right to exist, even if it does nothing for others. How to recognize that you are in the role of a rescuer. Sometimes you don't even notice that you're living someone else's life. Everything seems normal, caring, solving others' problems, staying connected, supporting, helping. But if you stop, a strange feeling comes. Where do I fit into all this? The role of a rescuer is rarely perceived as a role. More often, as my kindness, my responsiveness, that's just who I am. It becomes part of your identity, and that's exactly why it's so hard to recognize. It merges with your sense of self-worth. Let's look at the signs that can help you understand. You're not just helping. You're living in rescue mode. You feel guilty when you put yourself first. You rarely say no, even when you're tired, even when you don't want to, even when it hurts. If you do refuse, guilt gnaws at you. It seems you let someone down, abandoned, left behind. And normal people don't do that. You don't just fear hurting others. You're afraid that they will stop loving you if you choose yourself. You take responsibility for other people's feelings and actions. If someone nearby is feeling bad, you feel that you must urgently help. You worry about others' emotions more than your own. You try to smooth over, settle, resolve, explain. If a person doesn't take a step, you do it for them. If a person is rude, you look for what they are guilty of. If a person suffers, you cancel your plans to be near. It's as if you're always on duty. And if you suddenly can't cope, you feel unbearably ashamed. You don't know how to ask for help. Being weak is scary. Being in need is unacceptable. Because inside there's a conviction. I am the one who supports, not the one who's supported. Asking for help is almost a humiliation for you. You would rather endure, cope, break down, but not show that you're struggling. This is loneliness behind a mask of strength. No one sees how hard it is for you, because you don't allow it. You find yourself in the same relationships, where you carry. In friendship, in love, in family. You choose those who need saving. People with problems, dependencies, traumas. Those you can pull out. You invest, emotionally, physically, financially. You give a second chance, a third, a 10th. And each time you hope, this time he will change, she will understand, everything will get better. But more often, you just burn out. And the person next to you remains the same, or leaves when they no longer need you. You constantly suppress your feelings. You don't allow yourself to get angry. You don't admit you're hurt. You don't let yourself complain, because your feelings are not important. The main thing is to be needed, to be close, to be good. You smooth everything over. Smile when you're hurting inside. Support others when you're on the verge. Endure when you want to scream. And over time, you lose contact with yourself. Your feelings become dull, confused, muffled. You don't know what you want, only what you fear. Being inconvenient, unloved, rejected. You feel anxious when you can't control the situation. The role of the rescuer is not only about caring, but also about control. Through helping, you try to manage what is happening. If someone nearby does something wrong, you intervene. Give advice, warn, worry. Sometimes smother with care. But you can't let go. Because if you don't decide, you lose ground. And if everything goes off plan, It means you didn't try hard enough. You don't get what you give to others. You support. But when you're feeling down, there's no one nearby. You invest, but don't feel a response. You care, but you remain empty inside. It's as if you're giving yourself away, and you hope it will come back. But often, it doesn't. Not because people are bad, but because you've set your boundaries like this. I can handle everything. I will cope. I don't need anything. And they believe. You feel an inner emptiness. When everything quiets down, when no one needs help, emptiness comes. Silence in which there are no things to do, no tasks, no goals. And in this silence, it becomes frightening. Because without rescue, you don't know who you are. You feel useless, unneeded, abandoned. And again, you look for someone to help, somewhere to invest, just not to be left alone with yourself. And now, the main thing. If you recognize yourself in these signs, don't rush to blame yourself. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've learned to survive this way. In a world where love was based on actions, where being needed was safer than being yourself. But now you're an adult. You can see these patterns and choose differently. How to start stepping out of the rescuer role, awareness, boundaries, the right to vulnerability. You didn't fall into the rescuer role because of your fault. You grew up in conditions where it was almost inevitable, where love was conditional on correct behavior, where you learned to be needed, not alive. But now you're an adult, and you have the right to live differently. Not to rescue, but to be present, not to lose yourself, but to listen, not to carry everything yourself, but to build equal connections. Exiting the rescuer role is not a quick process. It's a journey. Sometimes it feels lonely and confusing, but with each step you're getting closer to yourself. Here's how this journey begins. Awareness. Recognizing the pattern. The first step is to notice what you're doing. You say yes even though you want no. You run to help even though no one asked. You take on someone else's pain as if otherwise it would destroy the world. You saved someone. And deep down, you hope to be appreciated, loved, understood. Mindfulness is not self-criticism. It is gentle observation. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why do I want to help? Do I really want to? Or am I afraid to refuse? What will happen if I say no? When you start to pause and notice, you'll realize how automatically you acted before, as if following someone else's script. Recognize secondary gain. Yes, it sounds unpleasant, but in rescuing others, there is its own benefit. Not necessarily conscious, but very strong. By saving others, you feel in control of the situation. Avoid confronting your own pain, loneliness. Receive approval, admiration, gratitude. Do not face emptiness, because there is always someone to save. This is protection. This is a crutch. And it has helped you survive for a long time. But now it's important to honestly tell yourself, I no longer want to be needed in exchange for love. I want to be myself and be accepted just as I am. Learn to feel yourself. Extended stays in the role of savior lead to losing contact with yourself. You don't know what you want. You don't understand if you're tired. You don't feel where you end and another begins. Returning to yourself is a practice. Keep a notebook and write every day. What do I want? What do I feel? Where is my no? Learn to recognize body signals, tension, fatigue, stress. This is important. Ask yourself questions before helping. Do I want this? Can I do this? You are not obliged to be perfect, but you have the right to be alive. Setting boundaries. Boundaries are not coldness, not selfishness, they are self-care. Boundaries are the ability to say, I can't right now. I get tired when I decide this for you. It's important for me to be heard too. If you used to always be available, it will be difficult for people to accept your new boundaries. Someone will get offended, someone manipulate, someone silently disappear. It's painful. But that's the price of leaving the old script. You can start small. Don't respond immediately to requests. Give yourself a pause to think. Learn to say, I need time. Remove the automatic yes. Let it be a conscious maybe. Remember, your boundaries are your personal space in life. Giving yourself the right to weakness. The role of the rescuer forbids weakness, but a person can't always be strong. That's impossible. You have the right to be tired, make mistakes, be confused, cry, ask for help. You are not obliged to be all-knowing, all-helping, all-controlling. This is not about strength, it's about survival. Strength is recognizing your vulnerability and allowing others to be near. Not saved, but partners. Changing the type of relationship. When you stop being a rescuer, relationships change. Some connections are falling away, some are transforming. A fear arises. What if no one remains? But the truth is that this is how space is freed up for genuine intimacy. Relationships where you are loved, not used. Where someone is with you, not for benefit, but for warmth. Where you don't need to prove your worth. But first, you must believe in it yourself. You need to become a person whom others don't just come to for help, but want to be around, just to be. Going to therapy or support groups. The path out of rescuing is a deep internal process. Sometimes it requires professional support, especially if the roots are in childhood trauma, codependency, emotional neglect. Psychotherapy helps to unravel love and self-sacrifice, hear your feelings, restore boundaries, form a new stable self. You can choose your path: individual sessions, women's circles, therapeutic practices, reading books, meditations, journals. The main thing is to move with respect for yourself, not to break, not to rush, but gently unpack what has been hidden for years. You are not obliged to save anyone else anymore. You are not obliged to be strong around the clock. You have the right to simply be and to be important, just like that, without a function, without sacrifice, without rescue. You. That is already enough. If you feel that this text resonated with you, you are already at the beginning of the journey. A journey whose end is freedom, warmth, genuine closeness. Not out of necessity, but out of love. Conclusion. How to live differently. With ease, with support, with yourself. Being a rescuer is like constantly standing on tiptoe. You are tense, attentive, ready at any second to lend a shoulder, support, close someone's gap. It gives a sense of significance, necessity, rightness, but you have to pay for it. With your body, nervous system, emotions, dreams, the depth of life. When you are always for others, there is no space left for yourself. That is why the way out of the rescuing role is not to refuse help. It is to reclaim the right to be alive, genuine, whole, not a function, but a human being. How else to live? With ease means without debt. Ease does not mean indifference. It's not about becoming cold or detached. It's about helping when you want to, not when you must. It's about choice, not automatism. You can do good, remain sensitive and warm, but from fullness, not from emptiness. Ease comes when you know you have the right to say no. You feel value is not in effort, but in presence. You understand. If you didn't save someone, it's not a failure, but maturity. At first, it may feel unfamiliar. Anxiety appears. What will happen to me now if I am not needed by anyone? But behind this, freedom. The opportunity to live from love, not from fear. With support means with roots inside. When you live in rescue, it's as if you're standing on one leg. The other is always reaching out to someone else, to support, to hold, to close, not to let go. And living with support is when you stand on two legs, in yourself. What gives internal support? Connection with the body. When you feel where your tension is, where your fatigue is, where your pleasure is. Clear boundaries. When you can notice where you end and another begins. Knowledge of your worth. When you don't need to prove it, you simply feel it. A supportive environment. when there is at least one person nearby with whom you can be truly yourself. Sometimes support is born from loneliness, but it is not emptiness. It is silence in which the heart can be heard. Being with yourself means being honest. You can start with one simple action. Ask yourself what you want. Right now. Without filters, without how to do it right, without looking at others. Maybe you will want to be silent or walk alone, or just lie down and look at the ceiling. With yourself, it's when you don't betray yourself for the sake of peace with others. It's when you don't agree if you don't want to. Don't rescue if you can't. Don't get involved in someone else's drama if you feel you're losing yourself. This is practice. This is the path. It's not about perfection. It's about living presence. What could your life become if you step out of the rescuer role? You will start feeling more in your body, in your emotions, in your relationships. You will start speaking more clearly about desires, boundaries, feelings. You will start truly resting without guilt and anxiety. You will begin building equal relationships where care is mutual. You will become closer to yourself, to the one you've long not heard. Remember, you don't need to be perfect to be loved. You have the right to be unready, to be tired, to have doubts, to be searching, to be imperfect. You have the right to just be. If you've watched until the end, that already says a lot. You care about yourself. Inside you, a readiness is already growing, which sooner or later will lead to freedom. But walking alone is hard. Therefore, share this text or video. Maybe it will resonate with your friend, sister, or mother. Subscribe to our channel, Space of Life. Here we talk about important things. No pressure, warmly. Leave a comment. Write about what feelings resonated, what situations you recognize, what has become clear. And come back when it's difficult. That is also support. You are not alone. You are not strange. You are not broken. You are simply learning to live not in a role, but in yourself. And that is the most important thing you can do for yourself.